What's HP Lovecraft's favourite streaming service? Chut-hulu! And we're already off to a bad start, but let's begin as we mean to go on. The first episode of Lovecraft Country has just dropped on HBO, and throughout this video we're going to be breaking down everything that you need to know about it. There's a lot to talk about, so I just want to dive straight into the episode, but obviously there will be heavy spoilers here, so if you don't want anything ruined, then I recommend that you take the other road out of here. If you're still here, then welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Definition. Now let's get into the breakdown. Okay, so Lovecraft Country begins in 1954, and similar to the book, we follow a Korean war vet known as Atticus as he searches for his father. In the original work, Atticus was called Atticus Turner, but here he's been renamed to Atticus Freeman to signify the subtext of the show, which is of course about racial tension. The show actually opens with a really stylish introduction in which he dreams about the war and his time in the trenches. It's initially shot in black and white, potentially to symbolise how races often fight alongside each other in battles, and colour is not really seen by soldiers. However, this opens up the longer that the intro goes on, and I think it carries a lot of symbolism with it. Now, one of the great criticisms of the Vietnam War by Muhammad Ali was that he would be fighting against another country for a country that didn't really respect or even like his race. He found this to be very hypocritical, and it's something that we see Atticus and the characters deal with. Even though Atticus fought for America against the Koreans, the people from his homeland view him as less than they are, and this really adds a lot of tension as we get further into the episode. Now, in the introduction, we also hear a voice narrate, "This is the story of a boy and his dream, but more than that, it is the story of an American boy and a dream that is truly American." Now, this is actually a quote from Jackie Robinson, who was the first African American to play Major League Baseball. It's at this point that things take a big turn, and some War of the Worlds inspired aliens drop down and two take part in the conflict. A red-skinned alien descends before Chut-hulu appears and is then taken out by Jackie Robinson himself. We then cut to Atticus on a bus, and we can see that he's reading The Princess of Mars. Like Atticus says, this is a story about an ex-Confederate soldier, aka John Carter, who ends up going to Mars and fighting a war there. I actually think that this symbolises the subtext of the story too, and how the season will go on. The whole point of the book was to show that black people can be heroes in the stories that we know and love. In the early 20th century, African Americans were not really featured in fiction due to white writers not including them. However, Lovecraft Country is retroactively going back and allowing them to be part of fiction during the time. This is why the book and likely season features a wealth of sci-fi, horror and adventure storylines. Now, I have read the book and it does get pretty wild, so do expect a mix of genres the further that we get into it. Unfortunately, the bus breaks down and the driver shows up with alternate travel. However, Atticus decides to skip the ride and he walks home with another black passenger after getting a couple of funny looks from the truck owner. Atticus informs the woman that he received a strange letter from his father Montrose, and we then jump to Chicago. Here we meet Atticus's uncle George and his wife Hippolyta, who end up having a bit of afternoon delight. They discuss the book they're working on, which is called The Safe Negro Travel Guide. This features heavily in the original source material, and it basically works as a guide for African Americans to avoid towns and locales that might be dangerous. Now, this was actually a real text, which was published in 1936, and it ran all the way up to 1966. In Lovecraft Country, it also provides some warnings on the monsters, but we'll get into that later in the video. We also meet Diana, and with Atticus, the group have a reunion before the latter travels out to the guide office. Here he picks up the book The Outsider and the Others by Lovecraft, which is published by Arkham House. Arkham is later dropped as a name, and this is actually a publishing body that kept Lovecraft's work alive long after his death. With George, Atticus also discusses Herbert West's Reanimator before dropping the name Lovecraft Country. The pair talk about Atticus's missing father, and he reveals the content of a letter that was sent to him. In this, Montrose detailed a secret ancestor and the birthright that Atticus was owed. I'll talk about this later in the video after dropping a big spoiler warning because it does ruin a certain part of the book if you've not read it, but just be aware of this letter as it does tie massively into the overall plot. Now, George corrects Arkham to Ardham, and Atticus goes to Denmark Vesey's bar looking for more information on his dad. This bar is actually named after Denmark Vesey, who planned a slave rebellion in 1822 and was executed because of it. Now we jump across to a night block party, and here we meet Letitia, played by Journey Smollett, who just so happens to be the sister of Juicy Smollett. Her older sister Ruby performs her sister Rosetta's song on stage, and we learn that her brother is near a town called Bideford. In England, Bideford was the location of a witch trial in 1682, and as witches actually feature in the source material, it does hint towards what could be coming down the line. We also get a tease of Letitia's character here, as we discover she only showed up to see her sister because she needed a place to stay. Throughout the work, Letty initially only really goes to people because she wants or needs something. She acts nice to them and uses her charm to lower their guard, but overall, her friendship often has ulterior motives. We then see Atticus and George looking over a map of the country with several symbols indicating what's included in the areas. This ranges from werewolves to wizards and even clan members. The latter two become interlinked the further that we get into the story, and the conversation culminates with Atticus realizing that his father is located in the land of death. Atticus then goes back to his home, and here he finds the Count of Monte Cristo novel. This centers around a count who's wrongfully imprisoned, and he then escapes his confines and amasses a fortune before bringing revenge to those that wronged him. This could be a metaphor for what will happen later in the storyline when Atticus himself is taken captive. Atticus also comes across his father's gun and speaks to G.I., who just so happens to be the same actress that played the red-skinned alien woman that we saw in the introduction. Atticus awakens to find Letty trying to hitch a ride, and though they don't say it, you can tell the two go way back. The road trip really brings them together, and along with George, the three head out across the country in search of Atticus's dad. Across the Midwest, they pass an ice cream stand, in which we see a family waiting to be served at the coloured stand, whilst the staff members ignore them and chat away. They also pass a sign that warns African Americans to not let the sun set on them in the area. This is because they've entered a sundown town, which ties into the title of the episode itself. Sundown towns were places where white people allowed black people to venture around during the day, but at night they viewed it as a civic duty to arrest them and sometimes even kill them. This is later referred to by a policeman, and it becomes the tensest part of the episode. Now, people at a pit stop make monkey noises towards Atticus, and we see the juxtaposition of this as the group are ostracized out of the area, whilst drawings of their faces are also used to advertise things such as Aunt Jemima. This really shows the differences between societies, and though the monsters are used as a metaphor, we really get the idea that there is a dichotomy of society here. This is showcased in a queue of African Americans waiting for the bus, whilst a picture of a white family driving a car hangs above them. It's not too subtle, but the montage shows you how things really were back then, and how African Americans have had to deal with several indignities. The group drop by the Simmonsville Diner, which is recommended to them by George. Inside though, they discover that it's now under white ownership. We learn that the previous owners were run out of the town, and it is possible that it could have been burned down due to the walls being white. This is similar to how the White House was painted white after it was badly burned, and a floor tile that slides gives it all away. Letty catches a member of staff calling the owners, and she rushes out to warn the pair, but it's too late as a group of firemen and citizens arrive, chasing the trio whilst firing guns. Luckily, a silver car shows up to save them, and this is tied to Atticus as it was seen following him earlier in the episode. A mysterious woman steps out, and I believe that this is Christina Braithwaite. She's someone that is tied to Atticus's legacy. I think she's going to become a big villain in the season. They make it to Letty's brother Marvin, who tells them of Bideford, and they also discuss the local sheriff, who pretty much enforces the Sundown law. The sheriff becomes the big bad of the entry, and it's definitely important that you pay attention to him here. Marvin and Letty end up fighting as things from the past are brought to the present, and it's here that we get hints about Letty's true intentions and how she drifts from person to person, getting what she wants, but she doesn't really have any stability. Atticus and George too have their disagreements over their father and brother. Clearly, there's tension between the pair over Atticus joining the army to fight for a country that hates him, and this caused a lot of anger between him and his father Montrose. The next day is when things really start to heat up, and the group make their way to Ardham. However, they become lost in the woods and pull over to figure out what to do. Now, if you've read the book, then you'll know that this is one of the most gripping parts of it. I always wondered how this would translate to screen, and it really doesn't disappoint here. Sheriff Hunt arrives, and the actor perfectly nails delivering lines that are deeply chilling while smiling through gritted teeth. I love how he gives them a time limit and then stalls them as much as possible so that they have less and less of it. He drops the line about the entire country being a sundown one and stalks them as they try to make their way out of the area. Now, not only are they not allowed to speed, but they're also forced to take a specific road, and this leads to an incredible scene that's also the slowest car chase I've ever seen, but also one of the tensest. Now, before he arrives, there is mention of a Shoggoth, and this is actually a monster from Lovecraft's Chut-hulu mythology. Like Atticus says, it's basically a blob with eyes and teeth, but it's not the real monster here. That is the sheriff. Now, this is what Lovecraft Country does brilliantly, and normally in horror films, when there's a monster, you breathe a sigh of relief when the police show up. However, here it's the other way around, and you're actually relieved when a monster shows up to take down the police. The group make it across the county line, but they're stopped by a blockade of deputies and taken through the woods. Here they're accused of committing a spate of burglaries, and just before Hunt executes them for knowing his name, we hear the cries of the Shoggoth. Now, if I was a policeman, I wouldn't be going into any of these woods at all, ever, and we can see why, because it completely decimates their forces, whilst Letty and Atticus take shelter in a cabin. Hunt and another policeman make it to here too, and hold out whilst George runs across the forest. George actually survives, and he draws the conclusion that the creatures fear light, and he quotes Dracula before they formulate a plan. Letty is forced by Hunt to make a run for the car, and the Shoggoth stalks her, and it just makes me scream, "Run, Forrest, run!" In the cabin, the bite slowly transforms Hunt into one of the creatures, and he begins to mutate before tearing the other officer apart. Letty makes it to the car and hits Hunt with it, but he flees off into the night, likely to make a return down the line. The trio leave the cabin, which is when the Shoggoth surround them, and it looks like their time is up, but a mysterious whistle summons them away. The group survive, and they make their way to Ardham, which is when they arrive at a mansion. Here they spot a silver car, and are greeted by Caleb Braithwaite, which ends the entry. Now, what's going on? What the hell is going on? Well, we will be discussing some book spoilers, so if you don't want to know anything, then I recommend that you turn off now. Now, it is revealed that Caleb and his sister are members of a group of wizards known as the Sons of Adam. It turns out that Atticus is the ancestor of their leader, who had a child with a slave woman. Caleb, their leader, wishes to perform a ritual sacrifice on Atticus, which will empower the group, and this is why he and his sister have led them here, all whilst protecting them. I think the next episode we will find out this, and also learn about their plan. I don't want to skip too far ahead and give you the outcome of that, as, you know, you want some surprises, but that's who the character is, just in case you're wondering. Anyway, that's the first episode, and I have to say I absolutely loved it, and obviously I want to hear your thoughts on it, so make sure you comment below and let me know. If you want something else to watch, then check out our breakdown of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we go through Lovecraft Country every single week. We're also giving away a free copy of The Avengers on any console of your choice, and all you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment on what you think of the show. The winner is going to be chosen at random on the 30th of August, so make sure you get involved, as I'd love to see you win. If you want to support the channel and get to see content early, then please consider clicking the join button below, and you can also come chat to us on a Discord server linked in the description, or at Heavy Spoilers on Twitter. Anyway, thank you for making it until the end of the video. I've been Definition, you've been the best, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Take care, peace.